Welcome to the America 250 PA Start Here, America Did podcast, telling the unique stories that make up the diverse fabric of Pennsylvania.
Welcome back to another episode of the America 250 PA podcast. I'm your host, Sydney Harris. As we approach Independence Day and reflect on the many paths that led to the founding of the United States, we're reminded that America's story is layered, shaped by conflict, resilience, and the struggles of many different people across this land. Today, we're exploring one of those early complex chapters, the Battle of Bushy Run, which took place in 1763 during Pontiac's War, a widespread resistance by Native American nations against British control following the French and Indian War. Joining us today, walking through this history, is Matthew Adams, museum manager at Bushy Run Battlefield in Westmoreland County. We'll talk about the battle, the people involved, and the ongoing work to preserve this historic site and share its story. Matt, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Can you start by giving us a quick overview of Bushy Run Battlefield and the Bushy Run Battlefield Heritage Society for listeners who might not be familiar with it?
So Bushy Run Battlefield is a 1763 battlefield of Pontiac's War, which is a part of American history most people have never heard of. It's in Westmoreland County near the city of Jeannette. And the Bushy Run Battlefield Heritage Society is the group of mostly volunteers that organizes the museum, organizes all the educational program, facilitates the events. I am the only employee of the Heritage Society. I kind of do all the administrative stuff. But by and large, anytime you go out there, it's going to be the volunteers that are giving the tours, running the programs, giving the school tours. So it's people from the community that just want to come there and take care of the place and talk to people about the history and introduce people to what happened at Bushy Run.
So by meeting you, I can tell that you are a big history buff, like we were saying. What first drew you personally to Bushy Run and its history?
I am personally not a huge military history guy in the sense of some people are really into like the troop maneuvers and the weapons and the uniforms, and that's all really valid and important history, but that just doesn't grab me in the same way it does other people. But when you get into the history of Pontiac's War in this period, and of Bushy Run specifically, there's a lot of really rich detail that you can dive into with it. So you got the big picture things. There's politics, there's economics, these big empires, questions about sovereignty of these native nations. There's a religious movement that plays a role in Pontiac's War. So all these really big picture things. And when you really dive into the details, it's a lot about just people making decisions about how they want to live their lives and where they want to live their lives and what they want to live their lives in service to. So when I think of Bushy Run Battlefield, I'm not necessarily thinking of troop movements and regiments. I'm thinking of how in the world is a Swiss mercenary, some Scottish Highland regiments who are essentially policemen, Native American nations from different parts of the country, a woman and her children and their family cow. How are all these people meeting in this like violent confrontation in what at that point was the middle of nowhere? And so that's what draws me into learning about Bushy Run Battlefield.
So the Pontiac War is a conflict that isn't often taught in schools. Could you go into a little bit more depth of what the Pontiac War was and how Bushy Run fit into it?
Yeah, and you're right. Most people don't know about it. I think when I first learned about it, I think it was in high school, and it was like one page or maybe one sentence in my Pennsylvania history class. And they called it Pontiac's Rebellion. So if you go back through history, it's Pontiac's War, Pontiac's Rebellion, Pontiac's Uprising, Pontiac's Conspiracy. Historians can't even really agree on a way to describe this conflict, which maybe says something about the attention it's gotten in history. So to understand Pontiac's War, we're going back to 1763, which is, still about 10 years before the American Revolution, but it's immediately after the French and Indian War, which itself was a part of a larger war called the 7 Years' War. So immediately after the French and Indian War, the major impact in this region is that the French have been kicked out. And that's going to affect things, especially for the Native American nations around here, because one of the ways the Native nations have been surviving the colonial kind of encroachment on their territory is by playing these big powers against each other. This really tricky, intricate diplomacy where they would play the French against the British and the British against the French. Well, after the war is over, they can't do that. The French are gone. So the only ones they have to deal with are the British. The British are the big game in town. And almost immediately, that relationship starts to sour between the Native Americans and the British. And there's a few major reasons for this. A couple of the big ones. For one is British settlement on native lands. One of the things that's happening as a result of the end of the French and Indian War, this treaty was made. The British said that they would not settle colonists west of this thing called the Proclamation Line. They would not settle on native territories. And pretty immediately, that treaty is disregarded by the colonists. A lot of them are upset, saying, we just fought a war to claim this territory, and now we can't even settle it. So they're flooding across this Proclamation Line and settling in native territories. The other big problem is that the Native Americans at this time had come to rely on the European powers for things that they couldn't produce themselves. So things like muskets, black powder, ammunition especially, which they had come to rely on. And at this time, the British colonial government, under a guy named Geoffrey Amherst, is saying no more supplies of weaponry of black powder to the Native Americans. And this really threatens their way of life. So they're angry, they're getting desperate, and this all culminates in Pontiac's War. Pontiac, most people know this as like the name of the car. It's actually named after that guy, Pontiac, because he was active in and around Detroit. Pontiac gets together this coalition of Native American nations, Ottawas, Delawares, Senecas, Wyandots, either in whole or in parts, these different nations together, to rise up against the British. And this is what we call Pontiac's War. And the way they're doing this is attacking all these forts along the frontier of the British colonies at this time. Even though they don't have a numbers advantage or even a technical advantage, they're winning most of these battles over the forts. One example, one of the forts, they know they can't take it by force in a straight battle. So they staged this lacrosse game in front of the walls of the fort. And one of the natives, seemingly accidentally, throws the ball over the wall of the fort. And when the British open the doors so he can come in and retrieve the ball, his compatriots are able to storm the fort and actually take it over. And they do this to a series of forts. The only two still holding out at this point are Fort Detroit and Fort Pitt. And that's kind of where we are on the eve of the Battle of Bushy Run.
So let's walk through the events of that 2-day battle. You talk about it being so dramatic. What happened and what were they fighting over?
These forts falling is a real problem for the British colonists, in part because these forts are what's defending the colonies against attacks from these Native Americans. And with the forts gone or under siege, they're pretty useless to defend from these attacks. So the British organize a force to go and retake Fort Pitt, to go and break the siege that's happening there. And they're marching under this man named Henry Bouquet, who's a really important character here. Bouquet starts out his career as kind of this Swiss mercenary, and he rises up through the ranks of the British army, and he's the one they're going to put in charge to go relieve Fort Pitt. He leaves Carlisle with a force of about 500 men, which is about a third of what he actually wants. And the men he has, he's not very happy with. The bulk of his force is Scottish Highland troops. Now, these troops had a rough time so far. They had fought during the 7 Years' War just a couple years ago in the British possessions in the Caribbean. And while they were fighting there, obviously they were fighting in a difficult climate. A lot of them had been sick with all kinds of tropical diseases that they hadn't encountered before. And they had been told, by and large, that when they were done fighting, they were going to go back home to Scotland. And sure enough, they get on a boat, and instead of going to Scotland, they go to New York, and now they're fighting in North America and fighting in Pontiac's War. So they're in pretty rough shape, and Bouquet is not very charitable in his estimation of them in his writings. He's angry. He says, they keep getting lost in the woods. How am I supposed to fight with these guys? So he enlists some local like outdoorsmen as like a ranger force as part of this column. And so he's marching the Forbes Road, which is kind of like the first trans-Pennsylvania highway. He's on his way to Fort Pitt. And on August 5th, he's actually off of Forbes Road. He's taken sort of what we might think of as an exit ramp to go to a place called Byerly Station. And this is really important. Byerly Station, we can think of as like an 18th century Sheets almost. It's a place where they would go He's planning to resupply, stock up on water, rest the men for a little bit. He does not know that Byerly Station has already been burned as part of Pontiac's war, and he is not going to arrive there. He's going to get about a mile away from where Byerly Station sits on Bushy Run Creek, and there he's going to be attacked by a Native American force that was waiting for him. And so this kicks off the formal Battle of Bushy Run. It's a 2-day battle, August 5th and 6th, 1763. The first day of the battle goes terribly for Bouquet and his men. They're in a bad position. The men didn't have water. They've been ambushed. They don't know how many men they're actually fighting against. To this day, we don't know how many Native Americans were at the battle. He's essentially playing whack-a-mole with them. Every time he takes a native position, they don't fight like Europeans. They're not breaking and running. They're surrounding him. They're fighting with like guerrilla tactics. And so he's not able to establish a good position on that first day of battle. And so he decides he's going to retreat to the top of what we now call Edge Hill, where he can defend himself. And that first night, he's in a really desperate situation. They're literally using bags of flour that they had brought with them for making bread. They're stacking them up like sandbags so that the wounded can hide behind them for protection. And in the morning, Bouquet concocts this very risky plan. He's going to fake a retreat back through the wilderness. And he begins this plan, and the Native Americans fall for it, and they break out of their position, and that's when Bouquet is able to kind of turn things around. The second day, there's very bloody, hand-to-hand, violent fighting that happens, but they end up taking the day, and they end up taking the battlefield as well. By the end of the 2 days, Bouquet has lost about 50 or 60 of his men, so in literal terms, a decimation of his army. We don't know the Native American numbers in terms of casualties, but it's probably similar, if not more, than what the British had taken. And because he's able to turn things around at Bushy Run, he's able to then get to Fort Pitt, liberate it from the siege, and really turn the tide against Pontiac in this war.
And you hinted at some unbelievable characters involved in the battle. Could you tell us about some of them?
There are a few that come to mind. The most interesting to me, I think, are maybe the Byerly family themselves. These are the folks that run Byerly Station, sometimes called Bushy Run Station on the Bushy Run Creek. The history of the Byerly Station is really, really interesting. It is, like I said, it's like this kind of way station. It's people coming and going from Fort Pitt are stopping here. We have really, really good firsthand primary accounts of people that visited there. So we know that at Bushy Run Station, on any given day, you could find British officers, kind of British grunt soldiers. You could find Native American traders, colonists, missionaries, Europeans. It takes on a real metropolitan character. You have all these different people from all these walks of life, from all different cultures, kind of meeting at this place at Bushy Run Station. But things, of course, change with Pontiac's War. This place that was once like a place of meeting and conciliation and trade is now a place of real danger. So one evening, not long before the Battle of Bushy Run, Andrew Byerly, the husband, is away. He's on a detail to go actually bury the victims of an attack on a town as part of Pontiac's war. And Phoebe Byerly, who coincidentally knew Bouquet, they were from the same part of Switzerland, his wife, was there alone at the station. In the middle of the night, she gets a knock on the door. She answers the door, and it is a Native American trader, someone she had recognized and was friendly with the family from his time coming and going at the station. And he warns Phoebe that she needs to get the family, get the kids, and get out of the station because the next day it's going to be attacked. So Phoebe, alone, without Andrew, in the middle of the night, gathers up her children, one of whom is a newborn. She had just recently given birth. Gathers up her children, gathers up the family cow, and starts the trek east towards Fort Ligonier through the Pennsylvania wilderness, where she will eventually arrive safely. That's Phoebe Byerly. Andrew Byerly, for his part, he is reunited with her at Fort Ligonier after he learns what has happened. The day after Phoebe had escaped, they had actually burned Bushy Run Station to the ground. But Andrew is reunited with her at Fort Ligonier. But it's kind of a brief reunion because almost immediately he is moving off with the British Army to go to Fort Pitt to liberate it. And he actually marches with Bouquet, and he actually participates in the battle at Bushy Run, which is, pretty much in his own backyard. Local lore says that during the battle, Andrew Byerly, actually on the night between the two battles, snuck out through enemy lines on his belly through the wilderness to go collect water for the wounded men. They say he went out to a spring that he knew was there to collect water in his hat and bring it back to the wounded men. And supposedly, if you believe the story, he did this multiple times throughout the night. After the battle, he and Phoebe ended up settling back on the land on the battlefield that Andrew had fought on, and they started a farm there. And to this day, the Byerly family still has family reunions at Bushy Run Battlefield. It's pretty wild.
That is so cool. You had mentioned that if the British had lost this battle at Bushy Run, it's possible that Fort Pitt may have fallen. What would the larger consequences have been for Pennsylvania and the American colonies?
Things would have changed, definitely. There's a lot of speculation among historians about what would have changed had Fort Pitt fallen or had they lost the Battle of Bushy Run. Had Fort Pitt fallen, I think we can say with probability that the frontier would have been opened up for attack. The British would have had to negotiate a peace from a position of weakness. So the terms of whatever treaty or resolution would have been more favorable towards the native nations. It probably would have slowed the British expansion westward. It would have also put the British on a different footing 10 years later when the American Revolution starts to happen in earnest. So things would have progressed differently with the American Revolution. And then, who knows, something really crazy could have happened if the British aren't expanding westward as quickly as they had historically. Maybe another major power would have came in. Maybe the Spanish would have came in. Maybe the French would have come back into that region of North America. So it's hard to say, but things would have been different, certainly, had the Battle of Bushy Run turned out differently.
So let's move on to the present. Can you tell us about the role that Bushy Run Battlefield Heritage Society plays today in maintaining and promoting the site and its history?
Yeah, so the Bushy Run Battlefield Heritage Society conducts all the programming there, all of the events, all of the tours that you'll go on if you ever visit the place. It is interesting and it is unique among museums in that it is kind of almost owned and operated by the membership of the museum. I always like to stress this to people. So if you go to one of these big museums and you buy a membership there, you'll get, free admission and you'll get discounts on stuff in the gift shop. And you'll get all that at Bushy Run too. But you also get a say in the decision making at Bushy Run. So Bushy Run Board of Directors is elected from and by the membership there. I answer to the Board of Directors. I answer to the membership. We have membership meetings where the folks, the volunteers, the members form consensus about the things we want to do, the programs we want to have, the direction we want to take the battlefield. And what we find is that the community has a greater stake in the place when they're able to participate like that. And that came in real handy last year. I don't know if you heard about this, but we actually had a tornado at Bushy Run Battlefield last year.
I did not hear about that.
Last year, June of 2024, there was a big storm and 5 tornadoes actually touched down in Westmoreland County. Lucky for us, one of them actually touched down right on Bushy Run Battlefield and kind of carved a path through it. So there was some pretty major damage. The museum got off okay, but the battlefield was in really rough shape. We were actually closed for about 2.5 months. During that time, the community really stepped up and giving donations to us, helping us with the cleanup. A lot of the museums in the region kind of opened their doors to us. So we took Bushy Run on the road for a couple months. We would go into other museums, other events that they were hosting, and they would let us talk about the history of Bushy Run and what had happened there and what had happened with the tornado. I don't think we would have recovered as quickly or recovered the same had it not been for the community-orientedness of the Heritage Society. So it's really unique, and it's really gone a long way towards preserving the battlefield.
That is a really wonderful way of getting the community involved. Additionally, Bushy Run hosts tours, reenactments, and educational events. What are some of the most popular events that you hold?
Oh, the big one is the reenactments. So it is the first weekend in August every year. In 2023, it actually coincided with the date of the historical battle, August 5th and 6th. But the first full weekend of August every year, we do a full-scale kind of battle reenactment. Last time we did it, we had about 100 reenactors come out. So you get a sense of what the battle would have looked like, what it would have sounded like. It's over 2 days. So the first day, you can come both days and actually see both days of the battle happen. And then in between the battle, we have lecturers, we have activities, things for families to do, things for kids to do, concession stand, all kinds of stuff. It's like a big carnival almost with history at its heart. And so the reenactment is the big thing. It's kind of the center of what we do at the battlefield. But all through the year, we do all kinds of different events to reach different aspects of our membership. Just the other night, we did an art show at the battlefield, and it was, just a way to bring new people out and connect them with the battlefield and with the museum. Once a year, we do an event called Pause in the Park. We always joke that 90% of the people that visit Bushy Run Battlefield are dog walkers and joggers. And we wanted to have an event to celebrate those people and kind of bring them into the museum. So we do a day where we turn the battlefield into like a dog park almost. So we keep busy through the year for sure.
Why do you think it's important to preserve and experience places like this, like Bushy Run Battlefield, firsthand?
You can read about Bushy Run Battlefield all you want, and you can listen to me talk about it all you want. But I think unless you're there and you're on the battlefield looking at the place where these things happened and getting the sense of scale and the sense of history, I don't think you really connect with it. I don't think it really clicks with you. And so it is vitally important that we have the battlefield, that we have it preserved, that we have it open for people to come and visit, because people should be able to go to these places to connect with history and to learn about history. I always tell this story. It's two of my good friends, Mark and Jared Frederick out of Blair County, are historians. They, a couple of years ago, went to Europe to visit some World War II battlefields and do some study there. And what they found was a lot of these battlefields that they visited were in various states of disrepair. Access was restricted. You had to pay out the nose even to get into some of these places. And I think at Bushy Run, we totally reject that. The battlefield is open to the public. You never have to pay anything just to come and visit it, to hike the grounds, to walk around, to be where the battle happened. We keep our admission prices and our event prices as low as possible so that your access to history is never contingent on how much money you have in your pocket. I wish people, not just in Bushy Run, but generally across the country, were more aware of kind of the open nature of these places, and we're aware that that's not a given, that can go away if we're not watchful of the stewardship of these places.
Leading off of that, about, what you wish for Bushy Run and what you wish people knew about Bushy Run, what's another thing that you hope that when people go, they appreciate by being at the actual field?
Yeah, I hope that people appreciate that it's right in their backyard. Literally in the sense, if you live near Bushy Run, it's, right in your backyard. But even if you're visiting from afar and you come to visit Bushy Run, I hope when you go back home, wherever that is, you get a sense that there's so much American history right in your backyard. So I always encourage people, if they're visiting from out of town, when they go back home, look into your local historical societies, look into your museums, look into places where there is history that's not being celebrated or preserved. What can you do to become a good steward of that? And I hope that's what people take away in part when they leave Bushy Run.
So I'm thinking a lot of our listeners are history buffs, which is probably why they listen to this podcast. They would probably now want to visit Bushy Run. Where can they go to learn more or even plan a trip out to Westmoreland County?
Yeah, absolutely. If you go to bushyrunbattlefield.com, we've got all kinds of information on there about our tours, about how you can visit the battlefield, how you can visit the museum. We've got information about school tour programs. We love having groups of school kids come down. We do a lot of hands-on activities with them. And we have information about different events we have going on through the year. If you're still on social media, we're on Facebook, we're on X, we're on Instagram, all the usual places. So, follow us if you want to keep up with what's going on down at Bushy Run.
Well, Matt, that is all I have for you today. It's been so wonderful to have you and to listen about this wonderful piece of history right in the backyards of Pennsylvanians. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to our listeners before we let you go?
I hope, people are interested and come visit Bushy Run and come learn about the history that happened there. That's a little bit unsung, but still very, very important and very treasured to us. And we'd love to meet you.
Thanks for being here, Matt.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's been a pleasure having Matthew Adams join us for the show and help us better understand the Battle of Bushy Run, a moment in Pennsylvania's history that reminds us just how layered and far-reaching the path to American independence truly was. As we reflect on the 4th of July, it's important to acknowledge that the foundations of this country were shaped not just by iconic speeches and famous battles, but by conflicts like Pontiac's War and places like Bushy Run, where the future of the colonies and the lives of so many hung in the balance. History isn't always simple, but it's always worth exploring. And the work being done at Bushy Run Battlefield ensures that these stories aren't forgotten. If you'd like to plan a visit, get involved, or learn more, you can head to bushyrunbattlefield.com for details. Also, don't forget, visit their reenactment a month from now, August 2nd and August 3rd. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and stay PA proud.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cassandra Coleman, Executive Director of America 250 PA. Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. We encourage you to learn more about America 250 PA and send us your podcast ideas at america250pa.org.
This has been the America 250 PA Start Here, America Did podcast, produced by Commonwealth Media Services. Stay tuned for more epic Pennsylvania stories at america250pa.org.